Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce David Pollock from the Community Security Initiative. David?
Thank you, Seth. Good morning, everyone, to the lucky number 13 of our series. We really didn't think we were going to get this far, but we're here and we're going to keep bringing you good information until you're sick of us. We hope to continue all of these points and answer all of your questions. Just one reminder before we start, we want to tell you that the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, it will be coming around this year. Everyone asks me when will the application be ready? And the answer is we don't know. We don't know because Congress has not passed a budget yet. And we expect, since Congress is so late in passing the budget, we expect the application period to be very short, maybe, a week or two. So we advise everyone to get started now. I will put a link in the chat for our grants page, and we'll go from there. Find out what your next steps are on our grant page, and please get started now. Check whether you're still pre-qualified and go for it. Now, last week, we started to talk about the idea of window film, and we're very fortunate this week. Dove lined up my mentor on this, who's the 3M manufacturer's representative for the Northeast. I might have that a little bit wrong, but what I have right is he's incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly helpful, and I want to introduce Jim Passage.
Well, thank you very much, David. It's been an interesting run. As David said, I'm a territory manager for 3M. I cover 19 states. I cover from Maine all the way down through the Carolinas, and I go as far west as Indiana and Ohio and Kentucky. I've actually been in the window film business for 38 years now and have been a direct employee with 3M for 22. So I'm kind of going to piggyback onto your meeting last week and your presentation last week to talk to you about security film and kind of things that I think when you're evaluating your needs or wants for this product, what you should be looking at. One of the interesting things is with 3M, we've actually have been in the security window film business since 1968. And we actually got into it through the Irish government, who was having all sorts of issues with bombings over in Belfast back in those days. And they came to us to say, we need a protective measure. We're realizing that more people are being hurt and killed by flying glass than actually the bombs themselves. Could you possibly come up with some type of product? We did, and hence we've been in the security window film business for 50 some years right now. So needless to say, in New York City, we have literally millions and millions of square feet of safety and security window film that have been installed. Just a couple big projects that you may or may not be aware of is the entire United Nations complex was filmed with this product many years ago, a project that we actually put a combination sun control and safety and security for combination energy and safety. We did 17 buildings for JP Morgan Chase after 9/11, over 1 million square feet of film. So, just some high profile things that we've done over the years. It's been a great add-on. We've done them for projects where people were concerned that they were going to be a direct hit, as well as neighbors of existing buildings that thought they could be collateral damage. So it has a long history, 3M security film, and we can get into all the details at a later date. But really, the purpose of my being here today is just to talk to you about what things that you should be looking at if you're thinking about installing security film for your building or for your synagogue, for your school, whatever it may be. So you hear a lot of talk out there about mils, how thick is the film? 8 mils, 14 mils, 20 mils, all this about thicker is better. And what we want to say is thicker is not always better. And really, when you're evaluating security film, the most important test that you can look at is called the Graves tear test. And that is a test that shows how a product tears once it's been broken or breached. So whether you have an 8 mil film or a 16 mil film, most of these products have the same break strength as each other, whether it's with a hammer, whether somebody's shooting through it. The point is, you want to know, how is this film going to hold up once there's penetration in it? How is it going to keep from tearing? the thicker the film, the easier it is to tear apart. Okay. 3M has a patented product that is totally different. Even though we have generic thicker films like a 14 mil, we have a thinner product, our 8 mil film, that actually has a better tear resistance and elongation. So in other words, when there's a penetration through that film, it's harder to actually tear apart. Very important when you're talking about active shooter protection, keeping the person out. Yes, the bullet will get through, but can that person pull himself through? Same with retail applications. You're trying to stop, yes, that you get that initial smash, but what holds that film together, that person can't get through it. So when you're evaluating films, always look for the Graves tear test, no matter what manufacturer, no matter what product. And just remember, thicker is not always better. So the other thing too, I think when you're looking at what product to choose, always look at the testing. Always look at the testing. All of 3M's products are third-party tested, and they're always done according to GSA standards. Every test should be an open book and should be available to you to go through, to analyze, to make sure you're getting the protection level that you want. The next part would be the attachment system. So security film is designed to hold broken glass together. But the most important part, we feel, really is the attachment system that goes around the glass. For us, it's called IPA. It's an adhesive that goes around the entire window, forms a bead that looks like an extension of the mullion. And what that's designed to do then is hold the glass actually still in the frame. So the film is designed to hold the broken glass. The attachment system is designed to hold it into the frame so it does not come in. So we consider it one system. The only time we may not do an attachment system is if the framing system is not designed. We can't get a thick enough bead, but that's a very rare occasion. In all the schools we do, it's an absolute must. Any bomb blast protection, it's a must. And all the testing is done according with that attachment system, according to GSA again. Last but not least, the warranty. With the 3M warranty, everything is 100% covered, both labor and material. Most of our films come with a complete 14-year warranty with a life expectancy of 25 years. Also in our warranty, we guarantee performance throughout the warranty. So if we had to take it off in year 13 and test it, the film would test the same as it did from day one when we installed it. And just to kind of recap, thicker is not always better. You know, you want to look at the Graves tear test to really make sure you're getting the protection level you want. Make sure all the manufacturers that you're looking at have third-party testing and it's available to you. Attachment system, very important, really probably the number one priority on top of the film. And then make sure the warranty is strong. And with us, even though we have 500 dealers nationally, 3M is the carrier of the warranty. So if you had a defect or your film went bad, 3M is going to take it down and put it back up at no charge to you. So, David, that's about all I've got for that.
Thanks so much, Jim. It's always good to listen to you and to learn from you. And do we want to take these questions right now, Terry?
I could stay on. If you want to continue, I can hold on and at your Q&A in a while, or we could do it now, whatever works best for you.
Let's keep with the flow, David. We'll answer questions at the end.
Okay, so now off to Dove.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. For our regulars, as well as if there are any newcomers. For those of you who are on early, we skipped the opening poll, but we had some of our key points at the beginning. Obviously, every week we continue to build and grow. So make sure if there's specific areas you want to look into, such as the procurement rules, you find those recordings of our webinars on our website, right? JCRC-NY.org/consultants corner. Our big topic, as advertised this week, is access control. And, you know, we obviously, like I just said, we kind of, you know, each week kind of builds and builds. We were lucky to have Jim. Unfortunately, in future weeks, we plan to have a whole session of Jim with some videos, some additional content, answer questions again. You know, these topics are not one and done. We can continue to go deeper. But Ilya and I and the whole team want to make sure you have those good basic understanding of these security systems to do an effective install. So this week, we're kind of leading off from the doors on the first week to window film and security to access control. Access control, hands down, is my favorite security topic. This is where a lot of these things become very real, right? What good is a bullet-resistant door if it's wide open, right? If you can't control who gets in and out. Even the film, right? If you're protecting your windows, but people just walk in, what's the point of protecting the windows, except for, obviously there are benefits, but in terms of someone breaking in a forced entry, if our doors are wide open, what have we done? So my favorite security topic, there's really a lot to think about. There's a lot of pieces that go into this, the what, the how, the why, and really you and your teams really need to think about how to do this right? Just a reader installed at the front and a couple cards, a couple access cards, is that the whole game? There's really a lot to it, and we want to help you design it right. This will also be another topic we'll probably hit on for a few weeks, as we go into it. Today, once I turn it over to Ilya, we'll be talking more about the hardware, but I want to talk about just the thinking that goes behind it to understand what we should be doing with the hardware. And again, we'll go further. So next slide, please. For those of you who have been sitting on some of our slides, you guys know I love the puzzle concept. No system, whether it's your doors, whether it's hardening your windows that we've talked about, the cameras, whatever it is, there's a lot of pieces. There's the puzzle. Think about the whole puzzle. There's not one solution with any of this alone or with the other systems, right? Everything kind of works together. Your access control system with your door locking, with your camera system, it all goes together to fix this, to create this puzzle so that everything works together. But access control alone itself, there's a lot of pieces to, right? You have to understand, what are your goals? What are we trying to do here, right? We have to understand the hardware and its capacities, its abilities. What can it do? Electronic, manual? Could it be just old style keys? And your policy even, right? If you don't have that standardized understanding of what you're trying to do, shared with the rest of your organization, how do you understand and design what your locking systems, what your access control should be achieving, right? Actually, years ago, with my previous experience with JCRC, we created what we call the think plate, an access control think plate, to help you kind of design your starting policy that should guide what your access control system wants to accomplish, right? I like to say hardware supports your policy. Without that, you just have a reader, but someone could be opening the doors for other people, leaving it open. It's not secured at the right times. There's also the operations that you have to think about. Who are we? What is our organization? Are we a school, a synagogue? Do we have other things that go on here? I've seen places that even host Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Which seems to be contrary to access control and knowing who's coming, but you can still create a good system if you sit down and you think about it. Additionally, your visitor management. So we'll think about who gets in and how, but what about your guests? So all these pieces are what we need to think about as we sit down and understand our goals, create our policy, and there's more. There's more to it as well, and we'll get into that ideally in the coming weeks. For our access control program, I think the first thing we always need to think about is what is our goal here, right? There's other benefits of a good access control system. If you're using electronics, you'll get a log of who came in, what areas they've accessed. But the real goal here, the basic goal, is keeping out those who don't belong. But that means that opens up itself a few questions. Who belongs? If you've been on some of our other trainings that the CSI team has done, right? The unknowns, the known unknowns, etc. Who are those people? How we authorize them to get access, and then how physically they can access the location, right? So now if they are authorized, what is the system that they can use to take advantage of the access they're authorized, thereby, right? If they can get in, now it's visitors and guests that we now have to screen, and we have to have a policy in place to understand how they get in, how we should let them, who should let them, how, right? All those pieces of the puzzle. So a couple little examples. This is not an all-encompassing list. There's a lot more. This is some basic concepts you can include as you think through it. It's not everything. It's just some examples. But for example, if we can limit the usage of how many doors we utilize at our building, ideally one door, that makes it much more simple to control access. If people are coming in from multiple points, that means you have to have the right system set up at those points to make sure the right people are getting in, the other people who shouldn't are not getting in, right? So we got to think about our operations. It might not always be possible, but maybe we can minimize how many doors are using. Maybe we can think about the times that different doors are used or the different processes. So we got to sit down as our committee, our team, and think about this. There's also a culture concept, right? It's hard. We're standing at that front door, we're on the inside, and we see someone else come. Do we open that door up for them? We've just kind of undone all our good measures, our good access control, our hardened doors, if we just prop that door open for someone. So it's kind of a cultural concept to understand what is the right way to do this, especially if they're not coming through the front end, right? If at your front door, maybe you have additional layers and screening, but you're letting someone in through a side door, you basically just let everyone else in your organization, everyone else in the building, you've made them a little more vulnerable. You've dropped their levels of security. Now, let's say you do have access, right? You have an access card, you're authorized, you're allowed to enter. Are you mindful of people who are around you? If someone's going to be tailgating behind you, right? So maybe it's a training thing. Maybe if you recognize someone's following you, can you just pass the building so they don't have that opportunity to follow you in? What are your other options? So it all kind of goes together, and that's maybe a training piece of it, making sure your staff, leadership, guests who use your access control system know how to use it right. Something we see way too often, unfortunately, is good doors, locked doors, propped open by a rock, by a chair, by a post. I've even seen locations that had really good access control systems installed that had another system installed with a chain and a rubber patch to bypass the locking mechanism so the door doesn't lock. Ideally, right, so undoing everything, undoing all our great security, a false sense of security for everyone else who's in the building, and we just undid what we had designed. And that's where we can think about the operations. Okay, so there's this usage that people need to maybe take a smoke break at this door or a playground, whatever it is that people need to use this other door. How do we design it on the front end so that it can be utilized correctly? If we don't design the access control system in a way that works for our operations and efficiently, people will find their ways around it, right? People will bypass it. And again, we have that false sense of security. If we expect guests, should the policy be that you need to put the name and information about your guests coming? That could be a policy piece, right? That we expect that you give it to the front office so that when that guest comes, they're known, not just showing up. If you have unknown guests that show up, perhaps you can let them know, well, there's a specific window of time for new members, new guests to meet with the rabbi, to meet with the executive, whatever it may be, but not just coming in randomly. And on that note, if you do have an expected guest or visitor, how do you screen them? How do you work with them? If you do expect them to come, do you escort them through the building so that, okay, they're through the front doors, but do they have carte blanche to the rest of your facility, right? Your visitor management program kind of works into your access control program. And again, these are just some examples, some things to think about, getting those juices flowing. But obviously there's the special considerations, events, celebrations, simchas, Shabbos and Yom Tov. Today, especially as we get into the electronic parts of access control, we understand that kind of seems to be a conflict with if it's an Orthodox location or any location that doesn't want to use electronics. We had a presenter last week from Securitech showing specific Shabbos locks, but even without those Shabbos locks, there's ways to do it, right? You have a volunteer greeter or officer at the front door so that only people, once they're screened, that person opens the door for them. There's many, many ways around this. We got to think about it on the front end. In future weeks, we'll like we said, there's more and more to dig into on the access control front. But remember, focus on that basic goal of keeping out those who don't belong. And then you got to design how you do it. So today, as I turn to Ilya, talking about some of the components, some of the hardware, some of the systems that allow us to achieve this goal. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it to Ilya.
Thanks, Dov. Hi, everyone. Very good to have you with us today. Thank you for your time. I very much appreciated what Jim and Dov were talking about, because interestingly, even though we started with something that seems disconnected, like window film, right? Well, what do you think forced entry protection gets you? It also gets you an increased level of access control. And so all of these things, like Dov mentioned to you, are pieces of the puzzle that you design around your facility to enhance protection. But instead of enhancing it in one location, you try to enhance it across the facility by thinking in many ways like a bad guy. like a criminal and trying to figure out, well, where can I, bypass the controls that are currently in place so that you can help your organization be better protected and then pick the right tools and measures. And speaking of tools and measures, I'll touch on the basics, electronic access control. And it's very easy for us all to think of access control in simple terms. I mean, you're looking at the photo on the left, and many of you could be saying, wait a second, that looks like a door handle for my house, right? Or for some other office spaces or other facilities that I visited. Nothing unusual about it, right? And you're correct. This is the simplest form of access control, a door with a lock in it, right? It's mechanical, has a key cylinder in it, works with the mechanical key, and it still keeps certain unwanted people out if the lock is properly used, if it's properly maintained, if the door and the frame and the walls around it are properly maintained and are in good shape. So, but then if we look on the right-hand side, a lot of access control today is electronic, and more organizations are trusting their electronic system and bring either something that looks like a card or a fob or even their mobile phone to help gain access to the main door or at the perimeter doors, and then within other portions of interior spaces in the facility. And so you can have something that's as simple as the photo on the left, or you can have something that's a little bit more sophisticated, like the photo on the right. Why don't we move to the next slide, Seth? And here is where seminar after seminar that we deliver, I must caution you that as soon as somebody says to you electronic access control, you should think that nothing is that simple. Okay, so remember that door handle that I was referring to, the simple mechanical access. Even when we talked about locks a week ago, those things are themselves complicated when you try to specify them and pick functions and everything. Well, the same applies to electronic access control. What you see on the slide are pictures of different types of devices that help run an access control system. Right? Starting on the left-hand side, obviously, some things will be recognizable, right? So an intercom or a reader where a person is trying to show a card to it. Those are the typical things that you see on buildings when you try to access. But there are many other components that you might not see, right? For example, let's say an intercom station, which is located, let's say, at receptionist desks or somewhere on the interior of the facility where you can have remote access or remote control and visibility of anyone who comes to your door. And you can make your decisions about whether you let people in or not remotely without having to go to the door. And remember how I said that our preferred mode of operation is that you have more remote control of your doors rather than having to come to your front door and thereby reduce the distance between you and a potential attacker. So there are many other components that you will see on the slide. Some of them are turnstiles at the bottom. In the center, you see a server. And at the top right corner, you'll see a network switch. You have a ton of cabling that's entailed. At the bottom right, you see an uninterruptible power supply unit. You don't have to remember any of this. Okay, so you can always go back to the recording. This is why we record these things. But the bottom line that the message that I'm trying to share with you is that when or if you are assuming that, oh, all I need is a couple of photos on the left side of the slide. Oh, I just need an intercom, or I just need a reader with a card, right? Well, to the contractor or to the manufacturer of access control systems, right? They don't think that way at all. They start thinking about everything else that proceeds from left to right on this entire slide. So to them, the rest of components matter quite a bit. So they have to, in order to make those visible things to you, the intercoms and the card readers work, right? There's cabling, there's signal equipment, there's uninterruptible power supplies, there's switches, servers, locks, and a few other devices and pieces of hardware that are included. And then last but not least is software. You know how if you present, for example, I'm sure you must have received some presentations or you've seen some of these things in action, or maybe you carry an RFID card on you. If you present an RFID card to the reader, right, it doesn't just go into blank space somewhere, right? It's processed, the signal is recorded, and it's matched to the records in the system to give you authorization to access it, unlocks the lock, right? So there's a lot of communication behind the scenes that is allowing for you to gain access to the facility as an authorized user. Well, a lot of that stuff is controlled and recorded through software. Right? And then software also helps you go back and review historic records and so on. And so many of these components need to be carefully planned. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. So there are many features. If you had to print out a typical product literature from an access control manufacturer, you will immediately see how it could be a page long, but in very small font, and there's tons of stuff that they discuss. A lot of this stuff is very technical language, or sometimes these product literature pieces, they could be multiple pages long, and it's just, a combination of different types of features, many of which are going to be difficult to understand as to like what's their value, right? So here's a very brief list of the key features of electronic access control systems that you should be thinking about, right? First and foremost, as I said before, is automation, okay? You get to control who and at what time and for what reason accesses your facility without having to stand by the door. The second one is remote control. We like, and we've said it many times, if you have listened at any point to any armed assailant presentations, you may have heard that one of the best defense mechanisms for you to protect yourself is to always keep as much distance between you and the attacker. Okay, well, remote control gives you that extra layer of protection. It allows you to maintain that distance while still maintaining control over your front door or various other doors around your facility. Flexibility. Electronic access control systems are easily scalable. So if you protect 3 doors with the same system, you can, using the same system and adding a few devices, protect multiple additional doors if you needed to. You could change the parameters of the systems. Remember, either in one of our webinars or in presentations you may have heard from others, there's such a thing as emergency lockdown. Okay, so access control systems help facilitate emergency lockdowns where with pressing a single key or clicking a single software button on your screen, the system goes into a completely different mode. So even if people with cards are trying to access your facility, they won't be able to come in. That happens because the system is flexible to allow for different conditions to occur and for you to operate not only like normal environment, people are coming in and out, everybody's using their cards, but at one point you could say, we're in a higher threat situation and we need to do a lockdown, right? And so most users will lose their ability to go in and around your facility. The same goes for event recording. So with the mechanical lock, you have 0 record. That's just very simple. Think about your own house, right? Whoever comes in with, let's say they duplicated a key and they manipulated your mechanical lock, you don't know unless you have additional pieces of technology that are monitoring that entrance, right? But well, the same goes here. Event logs give you that historic record of who went where, at what time, and you can then look for patterns. At the same time, access control systems are used to understand the main foot traffic around your building, like what particular rooms people tend to go to more frequently. And that way, you can organize additional levels of protection for more crowded spaces, for example, or spaces that are more frequently visited. Zoning access control systems is another good feature because you may not want the entire facility with access control to operate exactly the same way. So you may zone out a specific part of the facility, let's say by function. So if one part is a school, another one is a synagogue, and another one is some other event space, you may want the access control levels to be different for each of those functional spaces. And so zoning helps you do that. You assign different levels of access to different types of people and so on. And how those zones perform during different, let's say, time periods, during different threat levels, that can also be set up. And as you're hearing what I'm saying about setup, right? Much of that setup is done not by the wall at the reader. Much of that setup is done through software. So understanding what kind of features that software offers and how easy is it to use is very, very important. Last two, immediate status changes. I mentioned to you that if, let's say, there is a change in conditions, a rapid change in conditions, let's say you've heard that there might be a dangerous person in the neighborhood and you want to lock down your facility, that is something you're able to do with electronic access control. If you don't have electronic access control and everything around your facility is mechanical, you literally will have to walk around your building, at least on the perimeter, and lock your doors if you haven't already. There is no other way to do so. With electronic access control, if, again, you maintain your doors properly, if all of them are able to close and latch automatically, then it's much easier to ensure that perimeter of your building, at the minimum, is well secured. And last but not least, accountability. You've heard probably many, many times where if an incident happens, we want to go to the record. We want to understand who went where and why and at what time. Well, access control systems, when they're electronic, especially, as I said to you, when they're set up through software, give you that level of accountability. You can always go back and double check. You know what? Let's take a look at seasonal use of my facility over the last 3-4 months. Like, at what hours does the facility through the access control seems to be more busy than at some other periods? You can start planning different types of upgrades using those historic records, and also be more accountable, sharing those records when necessary, when incidents occur, and so on and so forth. And so I also want to touch on the point that is expressed here in the diagram or in this graphic. Access control systems typically are the ones into which you plug in and with which you integrate the rest of systems that you might be thinking about or you might have at your facility. You will want to integrate the video surveillance system into access control. Intrusion detection systems are typically integrated with access control. Emergency communications, specialty systems. And so all of that typically requires and is well supported through a single piece of software through the access control system. Why? Because that gives you central visibility of all of your alarm activity. It gives you central visibility and the correlation of access and video records or of access and intrusion detection records. Emergency communications are recorded as part of events that take place. So, for example, if somebody is trying to breach one of your access points with one of your doors, right? And not only do you get the fact that, okay, wait a second, so there's an intrusion alarm, you also get a pop-in video that gives you visibility of that incident at that particular time. Then if there are emergency communications that are happening exactly at the same time to alert folks to something, then those emergency communications alerts are also plugged into the same event recording. And that gives you a better ability to go back to the record, if you will, and centrally investigate what might have happened. And then also share more comprehensive information with local authorities that are helping you investigate an incident. So one suggestion is to always think about access control, not just as an individual system, but also a system that can receive signal from various other systems like video, intrusion detection, emergency communications, and so on. So, of course, we could visualize the outcomes of what I just explained to you if you're applying the need of having access control to your facility. On the left, we see a major headache, okay? Because what I just explained to you, if you finish this webinar, and even if you take very good notes, in about an hour, you will forget everything I said. For some of you, it will happen sooner. And for some of you, it will happen a little bit later, but maybe in a week. Okay, but I give you at most a week. to remember everything I just said. That's why we record these webinars, so you can go back to the record. But we don't assume that you must understand how an access control system would work by simply having attended a webinar, by simply having spent about an hour of your time listening to Dov, myself, and the rest of our team talking to you about it. So it could turn to be a major headache for you because you will have forgotten everything we said, and you will be dealing with an integrator who could possibly take advantage of you and might upsell you on things you don't need, or might give you products that are not a good fit for your facility, or might design a solution for you that just doesn't work the way you would want. And you won't understand until it's too late. So there are two outcomes always. One is to continue to have headaches and just be unaware and receive inferior systems or systems that give you a false sense of security. Another one is to begin to gradually try to understand how these systems work and what to look out for. So in the next couple of slides, I will share with you what are the very basic general things you should be thinking about when you're thinking about electronic access control systems. We said it multiple times, and we'll continue repeating ourselves, because one of the key components of you receiving good security is having a project manager. If you don't have a project manager, you're less likely to be successful with improving your security. The second thing, and we organize this series of webinars and we'll continue to deliver them and record them so you have access to this historic record, to this set of hopefully informative recordings, is to continually learn. So if you're planning access control implementation for your facility, and between what Dov said and what I'm saying, right, at least those things will help you to begin learning. And we've said it before. You've just heard a manufacturer explain to you some of the key things to look out for when you're buying a window film, what you should be looking for, what kind of testing you should be looking for. Well, the same goes for access control systems. You can speak to manufacturers who will share with you a lot of ins and outs of how access control systems work and what else you can plug into those systems in order to make your security of your facility better. Dov was absolutely correct. Thinking of security as a puzzle is very important because it's multifaceted. Okay, so if you simply say, well, it's just access control, it's electronic, so I just need a set of hardware and software and cables and I'm done. It doesn't work that way. Okay, there must be a process. And you should be thinking about process first. And in this particular case, you should be thinking from the outer perimeter of your facility. And just as if you were doing a mental walkthrough, as if you were demonstrating the facility to a person who doesn't know it very well. Just think about where are the access points, like Dov was telling you. Like, you must understand like how many access points you have. Why do you need so many access points if you are applying an electronic access control? And can you reduce the number of those points? Could there be one or two main points of access that you will then fit out with electronic security? Discussing, and most importantly, building agreement with your peers, with the members of your security committee, or whoever are the stakeholders, the decision maker, and recording your basic needs before reaching out externally is very important, because we recently witnessed several cases where we were asked for advice only to learn that the internal team at the facility wasn't really ready to speak to us because they didn't agree on what was necessary. Okay, so we can give you a lot of advice, but bottom line is your team internally, the stakeholders, whoever is making those decisions, should agree together. What are some of our basic needs? What are we trying to protect? How does access control fit into this, right? Listen to this webinar one more time. Call us, reach out to the RSMs and ask a few questions. But bottom line is there must be agreement, because what you don't want to have is you don't want to be in the middle of a bid when contractors give you pricing and you're bickering. Okay, that's not what you want to have. You want to have a consistent agreement so that you can evaluate bids properly and not delay the process for yourself and for the contractors. I mentioned coordination with RSM. That goes without saying. I feel that however narrow may be their bandwidth, particularly now. And we know that the RSMs right now are quite overwhelmed with a lot of different requests. And of course, as we're anticipating the grant to be announced, nonetheless, they could be excellent guides for you as you're contemplating of adding electronic security or just generally discussing access control around your facility. In cases that I've noticed, multiple occasions, obviously, the facilities could spare a little bit of money and hire a consultant so that person can help you figure things out and give you more concerted, more technical advice before you go out to bid. Okay? Possible, as long as those consultants are not in conflict by their ties with manufacturers and integrators. Okay, that's a very important piece to be aware of. As I said before, speaking with manufacturers is super important. They can give you a fairly good explanation, a fairly non-technical explanation of how access control could benefit your facility. Just the same way as all you were looking at was a slide with the 3M logo, but you've already learned a few things about picking out window film from Jim. So these conversations could be fairly simple and understandable. And speaking with peers and looking at completed projects. So here's where we're learning a great deal about how facilities have been implementing electronic security, right? They will be the first ones to tell us, you know what, we probably overshot it here, or maybe the contractor didn't do a good job here, or maybe, like Dov said, oh yeah, we don't actually maintain any of our doors. And we forgot that some people actually prefer to put chairs and rocks to keep the doors open, even though they're supposed to be on access control. And we spent thousands of dollars fitting those doors out with electronic security, right? Well, if those facilities are able to give you those lessons, please remember and try to not repeat the same mistakes as other facilities have made. And if there are any bright spots, if there are some success stories, for sure, record them. How did they manage a contractor? Maybe the contractor gave them decent training. Maybe they engaged with a manufacturer who walked them through and said, well, these might be some of the best systems for you. And here's what a good fit for purpose is. So you can minimize the headache and increase the likelihood of your success. And to finish off, general rules, okay? Like Dov said, learn and plan first, okay? I cannot stress this enough. I know it's a very simple statement, but sometimes we're at JCRC are left scratching our heads when we arrive at certain facilities. We're standing there, it's like, it's 2022. What's going on? We may have been talking to this facility for a while, and we still see some things that are strange, like they shouldn't be in place here. Something is it's not adding up, right? So learning and planning first still appears to be an important piece of the puzzle that Dov was referring to. One extremely important component, the system or whatever it is that you install has to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, if it's complicated, you will end up with propped doors. That's what's going to happen. Okay, I assure you, this is what our experience tells us. The more complicated the system, the more tricky or too techy it is, even though it might look very sexy, but if there's lots of bells and whistles, but you don't know how they work, who cares? We just walk away. We start ignoring a lot of things, right? So ease of use is very, very important. But also, very importantly, be guided by your operational expectations, right? Where do people come from? How do they enter your facility? What kind of groups of people do you expect? During what hours? How do you want the electronic systems to be set up in a way that they're respectful of your operations and your schedules? And how can you both increase your security, but not create a challenging operational situation? Understand what you're buying and how it works. Now, I've heard from a lot of folks who say, we just don't know who to turn to. Okay, so here's the webinar. It's going to be recorded, right? And you know where JCRC is. I hope by now you know where we are and you know what our email address is, or you know who your RSM is, right? But we keep repeating that. So at the very minimum, please reach out to us. If you already have some manufacturers in mind, not integrators, but manufacturers, please reach out to them. They'll give you a decent demo. They do that for free. They're very happy to teach you about their products. When you've implemented your projects, before you accept systems, make sure the integrators teach you. Make sure somebody on your team, at least 2 people, get trained in how to use the system, okay? Even with a lock, somebody needs to be shown what key to use, how to use it, and whatever, how to maintain it, right? Same goes for technology. When you're upgrading to your technology, particularly access control or whatever else, make sure you receive your training and make sure that the hours that are going to be charged for that training are included in your bid or the bids that you're receiving from contractors. Unfortunately, traditionally, what I've noticed is that contractors don't spend enough time training, and you should be mindful to request that. And last but not least, maintenance. If you don't maintain your systems, I don't care whether it's very trivial or very sophisticated, it will stop working for you eventually. Some of them stop working sooner. Some of them begin just working. The setup starts being much more challenging. It doesn't anymore align with your expectations. And if you're not trained well, you won't be able to change it. So you'll have to buy more time from an integrator to come and fix it. And so maintenance and understanding how to maintain these systems is super important. I think I'm done. I apologize that it took a little bit longer to get into my side of the presentation. Please start thinking about your questions. And I know that there have been multiple questions in the chat already.
Thank you, Ilya. Just trying to get some input from everybody out there. We'd like to hear how you're doing it, making sure you're still there with us. There's a lot of pieces to this. Just to reiterate, one of the most important things that I like to talk about when getting into the access control program is what Ilya spoke about on that focus of ease of use. We create a complex system, people figure out how to bypass it, always. People figure out, or they turn it off, worst case, and then they think we have it, that false sense of security. So as you design it, all those pieces of the puzzle and all the stuff Ilya was talking about, create a system that works both for the end user, right, the person who needs access, and also you as the operator, updating access credentials and privileges, using the software. If it's complex, you'll throw it out, and that's worst case scenarios. And with that, I will turn it to Terry. Thank you. And I think Jim is still available as well if we have any window film questions.
Yeah, I hope Jim is still there because we have a lot of questions. Dov, thank you, Ilya. So Jim, are you still with us?
I am.
All right, you may have seen some of these fly by you in the chat, and some of them seem straightforward, but we know that these can be complex issues for people, and even we learn every time we hear from you, as David pointed out. So first question is, the film that you install in these locations, is it considered bulletproof, or is it just to prevent shattering and shards of glass flying around?
There is no such thing as bulletproof window film. There are systems out there that have a combination of some type of plexiglass and window film, but window film by itself is not bullet resistant. Window film is really designed for two things: for bomb blast protection, to keep the glass fragments from flying in, or for unwanted entry, to slow the intruder down from getting in. But there's no such thing as bulletproof window film.
Great, thank you. The next question, and we get this a lot, is a lot of old synagogues have old windows. They may not be adequate to support film. What would your advice be, or how do you know whether you need to replace it or upgrade the windows to use the film effectively?
Well, if the glass is intact, in other words, if there's not cracks or breaks in the glass, I mean, we do 1/8-inch glass all the time. We do 1/4-inch, we do double pane. So if the glass is actually in the frame and there's no breaks or cracks in it, it can be filmed.
Great. And now we're getting into some more technical stuff, like with metrics, and I'll combine these two questions. So one concerns what mills you might recommend for ground level windows to prevent break-in. And then I have a question that's sort of on the same topic. What would be a good number when we're talking about the Graves test?
As far as thickness, we generally use either our Ultra S 800, which is the patented micro-layer technology that is more tear resistant, more puncture resistant. And once there's breach in through the film and glass, makes it more difficult to pull apart. We probably do 90% of all of our installations with that product. And I'm talking whether it's schools, military bases, embassies, consulates, airports. Most of the time, it's the Ultra S 800 product because of that special tear resistant quality. Our second most popular film after that would be our SH14. So it's the difference again is because the SH14 is thicker, and the thicker you go, there are films that are out there that are 16 mils and 20 mils. The thicker you go, the stiffer that product becomes and the easier it is to tear once there's penetration. So in my world, we're selling Ultra S 800 90% plus of the time, whether it's ground floor, above, whether it's for bomb blast protection or unwanted entry. That still is probably the best performing product all the way around.
Great. And can you touch a little bit upon, I've never heard of the Graves test before. What's the scale on that? And do you have numbers?
You know what? I would have to show it to you. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have the exact number. I can send you the graph that we can forward on to everybody. It just shows that the break strength point is usually at about 32,000 PSIs for all films, whether maybe give or take 1,000 here or there. And it just shows how quick you can tear a non-micro-layered film versus one that is micro-layered technology. So I'll get you the actual test result, but I don't have it in front of me.
If you send that to us, we'll post it on our Consultants Corner on the website as one of the documents for everybody to take a look and download.
Perfect. I'll get it out to you today.
Those of you who missed the beginning of today's session with Jim talking about their products, we hope to bring Jim back for a full session. Hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that test.
Sounds good.
I think we only have a couple left, Jim, but there may be some. I'm scrolling down in the chat box, so I may not see others that popped up. But the last couple of ones that came on while you were speaking is, can the film be darkened? And this is a question we get a lot too. Can the film be darkened or shaded to avoid clear vision to the premises from somebody who's outside?
That's a great question. And we actually have combination sun control, which would be that darker or reflective film, along with the safety and security benefits as well, especially in this day and age where people are looking at reducing carbon emission reduction and trying to comply with local law 97. So they're looking at the energy benefit as well as the security benefit. So we do have products that will give you both.
Great. Here's the last one that I know of, but if you can stick around for a few minutes as we scroll down, I know there's some access control questions coming up, but for right now, here's the last one. And I'm sure you're impacted by this like everybody else. How's supply chain issues treating 3M, and what about inflation in regards to prices?
We just implemented a price increase about a month ago. We anticipate another one coming some point this year, probably around April or May. Up until that point, we have held prices for 3 years. So we've been pretty consistent in our pricing for a long time. Supply has been pretty good all year. And we ran into a little bit of a glitch with our Ultra S800 for a little bit, but we are back and running with that. In fact, I just got a back order report last night, and there's only one security film, one of our tinted, as I just mentioned, energy, sun control, reflective films that looks like it's going to be on back order for about another month and a half. But other than that, we're pretty well stocked right now.
Yeah, no surprise there. So thanks, Jim. We may come back to you in a minute. I'm going to shift gears here now and go to access control. Ilya, this one looks like it's for you.
Someone asked about contacting Jim directly. What you should do is to contact your regional security manager. We have 5 3M dealers who serve the region, and we can send you addresses and contact information for all 5. You can direct your questions to those people. Jim, is that an appropriate way to handle it?
That's fine. Or if they feel free, they can call me as well if they have some questions that they want answered without worrying about me hounding them for a price or putting in a proposal if they just want to talk off the record.
Your RSM has Jim's contact information. Jay, just contact Leron.
Ilya, what about facial recognition for access control? What's your take on it?
My take is that as any tech, today it seems like it will work, but because it's newer, I suppose it might be a little bit more expensive than your traditional technologies that have been known to be in the market for a little bit longer. There are also some questions around facial recognition failure rates and some questions about privacy, expectation of privacy for facial recognition. Those questions should be addressed. But if you're thinking about adding facial recognition to your access control system, please consider alternatives and just look at the price difference. If facial recognition is what you like and it seems like you can implement it, the manufacturer is confident in that, but the price difference is not very significant and you feel comfortable with it, make sure that you test, you pilot the product, make sure that the manufacturer sets it up for you, that you can verify its optimal use that you desire, and then go for it. If you are able to compare it with more traditional products, then you'd probably do yourself a favor. So that's my answer.
Can I just add, I believe, and now, Dov, you can confirm this, I guess. It's not approved under the federal NSGP grant to use facial recognition, correct?
Well, I was
For
gonna make
access
another point,
control-
but to Seth's question, it's not that facial recognition isn't approved. It's now we're talking about a biometric capability of access control. So hypothetically, it would be approved under the grant. But before we go on, first, those who know me well know I'm a privacy nut. So from that end, I stay away from facial recognition issues. But I'll add this. It's a biometric concept. So it's another way to check authorization status, whether it's a card, it's your face, it's your fingerprint. But what I've seen in the field, in my personal experience, is it's slower. There's more fail rate when using your thumb, your finger, your face. And what we talked about, make it easy to use. If people start coming up to the door and they have to shove their face in a screen, or they get a lot of fail rates and they get to the door and it doesn't open, you're not going to be using it anymore. So if you go that route, and I personally am not a fan, get a good system. Don't cheap on that, because that once that fail rate starts hitting, it's going in the garbage.
Not all facial recognition systems are the same and rated the same and have the same level of accuracy. If you're thinking of going that way, contact your RSM. We have the functional equivalent of consumer reports tests on the different systems, and we can tell you how your system is rated.
Please consider the weather elements. If you're putting facial recognition systems outdoors, imagine testing them out and trying to place your face just right so that the facial recognition thing picks it up. And check your time as you're doing this, how long it's going to take per person for you to achieve access. And then think about throughput. How many people per minute are you comfortable keeping outside so that they can align their faces? Let's see how that works. Anyway, my sense, bottom line is, to be blunt with you guys, I would go with something a little bit easier to use. I would go with something that's more traditionally proven, that doesn't require me to align my face with the video camera. You have larger things to worry about. You need to put window film on your windows. Stop thinking about sexy bells and whistles. Okay, start thinking about systems that are proven for years, that work, that have been tested in all different conditions, and that the failure rates are minimal. But if facial recognition is something you want to try, give it a shot.
That's a good segue into the next one. You want to go simple? What about using keypads? And if we're going to talk about keypads, let's integrate that with Shabbat locks. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, the Shabbat lock, I think we covered during the last webinar, so I welcome for you to just go back to the recording. And there was a good presentation from Securitech where you basically isolate certain time periods for your access control system where it turns off, and you have a proper mechanical locking that supersedes the electronic disallowed Shabbat operation. It seems to have at least different products available for that. But please take a look at the previous webinar. So there are solutions for it, absolutely. And Dov covered it last time. And again, no sense of belaboring, but please reach out to the RSMs. We'll walk you through it. No problem. What was the other question, Terry? I apologize.
Just keypads. What about keypads?
Keypads. Let's put it this way. It's not one of the preferred methods that I have seen being successfully used for two reasons. One is that depending on the type of keypad you get, right, the buttons on the keypad have a tendency to wear off. Actually, we had the same explanation from our friends at Securitech when they were describing how the punch locks don't hold up to consistent use either. It's a little bit easier to understand the code. The other thing about the keypads is if you're able to introduce individual codes to everyone, that's great. But the problem is that people share a lot. And they'll say, hey, why are you standing here? My code is 7825. Go ahead. Don't worry about it. Okay? We're just too kind. All right. And kindness beats security in a second. Okay. So we had those conversations. We shared with you that this typically is normal human behavior, right? What the keypad unfortunately doesn't achieve, it doesn't reduce that exposure. It doesn't reduce that vulnerability. People will share codes.
If I can jump in as well, like we meant, first of all, on the Shabbos locks questions, we hopefully will have further access control segments here. And we'll get in, there's other solutions. Obviously, Securitech makes one piece of good hardware. That's an option, but there are other ways we can work with it, and we'll talk through it. So stay tuned. B, regarding the keypads, like Ilya said, the kicker here is that it's so easy to share this information. Well, someone says, well, I can give them their card. Well, you can give one person a card once. You blast an email out and it's gone. That code is, everyone has it. So unless you have a good maintenance system with it, you're resetting the codes periodically, maybe a lot. You use other features. I've seen pads that kind of scramble codes. But honestly, look, a code versus an open door, it's an improvement. But if you have the option to use a good access control system with some sort of reader that's individualized, is your win. There's too many failure points for the code system. It doesn't mean there's never the right application, but shouldn't be your go-to. Example on Shabbos when we need the mechanical cipher, but again, all other points, it's locked electronically.
Jim, back to you for a couple of quick questions. Are you still with us?
I am.
All right. So one question is your film like Lexan? And the second question is, can Ultra S800 be used on older double hung windows?
The answer is yes to the older double hung windows. Not a problem at all. We do that type of application every day. As far as Lexan, I'm not quite sure what they're asking by that. Film itself is polyester. Lexan is a totally different substance and type of surface. I mentioned earlier about not being bulletproof. Usually when somebody's trying to sell a bulletproof type product with window film, it's the Lexan backing with it. Lexan, when we run into it, is actually a unit, like a glass piece that goes on where film is polyester that gets installed on top of it. If that makes sense, or if I'm answering the question correctly.
Yeah, I think, I hope so. It's a little more technical than anything else. I think, Doug, we're at the end. I have one question from somebody's name who I recognize that concerns finding a project manager. I don't want to go off topic, so I'm going to answer that particular question offline. And I think we've covered everything. If I miss anything, I apologize. You can always ask us questions at any time at CSI_questions@JCRC-NY.org.
Just to close out on that question, and I know we're over time, but this is the best part, right? We get the direct questions. The project managers that Ilya talks about, that we all talk about, doesn't necessarily need to be a technical consultant specialist. It could be someone from your team or committee that's leading the project, correlating all the questions and the needs and moving it forward in that one point of contact. But additionally, you could hypothetically use the M&A funds from your management and administration funds from the grant. But unfortunately, those are limited. So I think my personal advice, if you use that to administer your grant, be specific on what you want the person to help with. Unfortunately, the consultants I know that are out there, they have a very hard line in the sand what they can really do. So if you say we want specifically assistance with identifying the systems, the hardware, the components, I think that could be a fair approach. The last question I saw about, is it easy to switch from the locked mode on Shabbos to a regular lock? If you have a good system and a good design from the front end, and that's, I think, the biggest message from today. If we design the system right, our needs and our goals from the front end, we can create a system that does our needs, accomplishes our goals. If it's hard to get into the system and turn off the clock, so then you may not do it. But if the right system, the right setup, it should be an easy transition. Ilya, any last comments and we'll close out?
Two things. First is I noticed there's one question I wanted to answer really quickly, but the other one on the project manager, our expectation is not that you go out and collectively go and hire individual project managers for your facility, thus blowing the budget or getting money out of nowhere, right? What we're hoping for is that you take away the need to develop a project manager in-house within your own facility. Being a project manager simply means that somebody needs to dedicate time to the project, sufficient time to the project, rather than a committee of people where nobody's the leader and everybody's pointing fingers at each other. That is the worst situation to be in. Okay, that's basically the message that we're hoping you take away. The question I think we missed was the recommended adhesives for window film. If you're asking that question, then I would have a question for you. Are you installing by yourself without using a contractor? If you are, you shouldn't. You should be asking that question to the contractor and most importantly to the manufacturer. Manufacturers have specified adhesive types. They have the names and Jim, if I misstated that, please correct me, but the way it works is that it probably is not important for the client who's receiving the window film product to know what adhesives are being used, right? What you should be doing is you should be verifying with manufacturer and with the contractor that the product is installed per manufacturer's specifications and requirements. That's what you should be doing, rather than saying what adhesive is being used. It's, if you want to get into those details, I worry that you will want to install the film by yourself, which we don't recommend.
We also, too, one of the benefits, obviously, is the warranty that comes with it when it's done through an authorized dealer. It's we always say if we really wanted to increase business, we would install your self units for it, but we don't sell it to anybody except our authorized dealer network. They're the only ones that get to handle the product and install it, and because of that, and they're certified and trained by us, we warranty their installations.
Jim, how long is the training? How many hours of training do you give an authorized dealer?
Well, they're usually in for 3 days, but we have various training tapes and sessions and recertifications and that over the years.
The answer to your question is if you take the 3-day training, or you can have your staff take the 3-day training and pass it, then worry about doing it yourself.
Yes, that would be the right answer, except we also, it depends when we set up a new dealer. How many dealers do we have in a particular area? We never set up and train a company or a GC for one job. It's when we set up a new dealer and they go through the training, it's that they are going to be a window film dealer for us going forward for many, many years.
Well, with that note, thank you, everyone. We covered a lot. We always go over because we have good discussion, so we appreciate everyone sticking with us. Jim from 3M, thank you very much. David Pollock, Seth, Terry, and of course, Ilya, thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. These sessions are every Tuesday. We'll cover a bunch of topics, but if you get your emails from our team, they'll give you our main topic, and we'll continue on the road going forward. So thank you, everybody, and have a great week. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you much. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim. Bye.